Hey boys and girls, welcome to another engineering and mechanics class. My name is Nadine Thompson and I am from Winston Jones High School, and I will present on your unit, This Little Light of Mine. The topic for today's lesson is types of energy sources. Have you ever wondered, where do we get electricity from? Where do we get our primary sources in order for us to get electricity? Well, we will be looking into that. Primary sources of energy. Primary sources of energy can be fossil fuels, solar energy, hydroelectric, wind energy, tidal energy, geothermal energy, biofuels, and nuclear energy. All right, we are going to look deeply into each of these fuels now, how we get them. For example, like fossil fuels. What is fossil fuels? I guess we'd have heard the word around town, but today we are going to have a better understanding of what fossil fuels are. Fossil fuels are coal, oil, and gas. And these are called fossil fuels because what? Because they have been formed and been fossilized, coming from remains of plants that we would have had from centuries ago, plants and animals. Once they are being fossilized, they become fossil fuels. They provide around 66% of the world's electrical power and 95% of the world's total energy demand. Can you imagine? How does fossil fuel work? All right, let's go deep into it. For example, coal is crushed to a fine dust and burnt. Oil and gas can't be burnt directly. All right, let's give you a little basic rundown of how we use fossil fuel to actually produce electricity. For example, in Jamaica here, you would burn the fuel, heat the water to get steam, and the steam from this heated water would turn the turbine, and the turbine turns the generator, and then you produce what you call electrical power, and then this electrical power is sent to the grid and then sent right across Jamaica. Coal provides around 28% of our energy, and oil provides 40%. Crude oil, which is otherwise called petroleum, is easier to get out of the ground than coal, as it can flow along pipes. Crude oil, which is otherwise called petroleum, is easier to get out of the ground than coal, as it can flow along pipes. This also makes it easier and cheaper to transport. Natural gas. Natural gas provides around 20% of the world's consumption of energy. All right, we are going to look now at the advantages of using fossil fuels. All right, very large amounts of electricity can be generated in one place using coal and fairly cheap, meaning you're able to produce this vast amount of electricity at a cheaper rate. All right, and also, like we said earlier, in terms of transporting, the transporting oil and gas to power station is also easier. So you can either use pipe or you can use trucking as a form of transporting oil and gas. And gas-fired power stations are very efficient, meaning you can get a lot of energy produced, and also it will be done at a very cheaper rate. Also, another benefit is that fossil fuel powered stations, they can't be built anywhere, and you can build them on land or on the edge of a sea or whatever. All right? We are going to look at the disadvantages now. Disadvantages of using fossil fuels. Basically, the main drawback of fossil fuel is pollution. And we know, and we'd have learned this from integrated science class, and we have also learned it from social study as well. Burning any fossil fuel produces carbon dioxide, which contributes to the greenhouse effect and warming of the earth. And we are currently experiencing some of these side effects. For example, we always hear them mention about global warming, and we hear the environmentalists always speak out about the mass pollution and how it's affecting our environment. Well, this is why we are encouraged to find other forms or other means of generating electricity, and that is why there's a rush and there's a push for us to use renewable energy. And this is be one of the reasons why, because fossil fuel have a serious side effect to climate change. All right? Burning coal produces sulfur dioxide, a gas that contributes to acid rain. And we know acid rain, we would have experienced acid rain. Acid rain is when you have those type of rain and it's tend to be acidic. Oil spills are a serious problem. And like we said, in terms of the transportation, when we have oils transporting on ships and so, in case there is a mishap with the ship and there's an oil spill, we know what is going to happen inside the ocean, is that we're going to have a serious fish kill, so be damaging what is happening inside the sea and all of that, and that we don't want. We don't want to disrupt our ecosystem. So that is one of the main reasons, like I said, there's a major push for us to use renewable energy. All right? Mining coal can be difficult and it's also very dangerous. Strip mining destroys large areas of landscape, and most of us, if we follow the world news, would have heard a number of situations in which persons get trapped in coal mine for a number of days and they end up losing their lives. So like I said, this whole mining of coal can be very serious and also dangerous. All right, and fossil fuel will be classified as one of those resources that are they are non-renewable, meaning once they have been depleted, they cannot be replaced again. Okay? All right, we are going to look at some of the alternative energy sources that we use to generate electricity. And these alternative energy sources are solar, wind, hydropower, tidal power, biomass, and geothermal. All right? And these alternative energy sources are classified as renewable sources of energy because they can be renewed. Once they finish up, they still can be, they're always there. For example, the sun. For example, we may not have sun today, but we'll have sun tomorrow. But unlike fossil fuel, once fossil fuel is finished, it's just finished. So we just have to go somewhere else. Unlike the sun now, the sun comes today, may not come tomorrow, but it will come the next day. So it's classified as a renewable source of energy. Solar energy. This energy comes from the sunlight, which is converted directly to electricity using semiconductor cells. Solar energy can be used to heat water in solar water heaters. Also, solar energy can be used directly to generate electricity in solar cell, meaning these would be like the solar panels that you will be seeing mounted on the rooftops, or you will see them mounted on like light poles to provide lighting at night. All right, we have two types of solar power. We have active and passive. Active solar would be like the solar water heater, all right? It is using a thermal form of energy. So what you have, you'd have the hot water storage and the hot water panel. You can see the PV, the photovoltaic cell, and the heat exchanger. For the passive now, it would be like when we use the solar panel, we place them and mount them on top of our roofs, and they have to be mounted directly where they have full exposure to the sunlight. They cannot be placed on a roof where you have a tall tree providing shade over the roof. That doesn't make any sense. It has to be well exposed to sunlight. All right, active solar power, like we said, is energy from the sun is stored in a thermal mass, and when needed, heat from thermal mass is pumped throughout the structure, and that is what you would experience when you install a solar water heater at home. Passive solar power. Passive solar works on the principle that hot air rises and cool air sinks, and this we would have learned from science from the term convection. Solar heats air and it moves through convection through the structure or to thermal mass, and that is what we refer to as passive solar. So like I said, we have two types of solar, and the two types of solar are active and passive solar. We are going to look back at we're going to look at the advantages and the disadvantages of solar energy. All right, some of the advantages are the sun is in abundance. So we always have the sun. Even if we don't have it today, we'll have it the next day or 2 days after. All right, so the sun is always in abundance. So that's one of the main advantages of solar power. Also, there's no greenhouse gases. So it simply means we are going to have fewer air pollution. All right, the only form of air pollution that you would have associated with solar would be with actually the different materials that are used to make the solar panels. That's the only bit of damage you would literally create to air. All right, and when it comes to repair, the repair is simple and it is minimal. All right. Also, it will eventually work out cheaper over the long run. All right. Some of the main disadvantages is that retrofitting is needed if the structure is not already designed as a passive solar. For example, like your solar panel, if it is supposed to be placed on the top of your roof, if your roof cannot accommodate the weight, a various modification would have to be done in order to facilitate the structure, which simply means you would have to invest a lot of money for that as well. Also, it has limitations in that at nights and some locations are better than some. So you're going to realize that when you place your solar panels in a southern facing slope, you tend to harness more sun rather than in a north facing slope. All right. Also, the initial capital, like I said earlier on, can be very high, but it will work out over the long run. All right. It will pay for itself over the years to come. All right, we are going to move on to hydroelectric now. Hydroelectric is associated with water, as hydro would indicate that we're talking about water. And we have an hydroelectric plant. We have a main hydroelectric plant, especially in Magotty, St. Elizabeth, and we also have one in St. Anne's. Also, let's have an understanding of what hydroelectricity is about. Hydroelectricity is that electricity that is generated when water behind a dam is allowed to pass through, causing a series of events to occur that lead to the production of electricity. Like I said, hydroelectricity is flowing water is used to drive turbines and generate electricity. Advantages. Like I said, it's a renewable source, meaning it can be replaced. Energy can be stored until needed. No pollution of the air. All right? Disadvantages now. We have very high initial costs. So to set up a hydroelectric plant is very costly and it is very expensive. Very expensive. However, it is worth the expense, I can tell you that. Changes in the environment, example, for flooding, in terms of flooding. For example, like if you experience onset a lot of rains over a period of days or weeks, we have to do a lot of field research and study to look at where we actually place a hydroelectric plant. All right, so we can set it in certain areas that get flood easily, and then we know once we have flooding, a lot of persons will become displaced, and we have a lot of soil erosion and things falling apart. Also, there's another issue with setting up a hydroelectric plant is that people may have to relocate, and we know that persons, when they're attached to their community, they tend to have issues in relocating or moving to a next area. Fortunately for Jamaica, we don't have an issue like that in setting up our hydroelectric plants. All right, let's move on to wind energy. We have used the wind as an energy source for over a long, long time. All right, did you know that the Babylonians and Chinese were using wind power to pump water for irrigating crops 4,000 years ago, and sailing boats were around long before that? Wind power was used in the Middle Ages in Europe to grind corn, which is where the term windmill came from. All right? let's look into how wind power works. All right? What we see happening is that the sun heats our atmosphere unevenly, so some patches become warmer than others. These warm patches of air rise, other air blows in to replace them, and we feel a wind blowing. We can use the energy in the wind by building a tall tower with a large propeller on it to spin. And from that, that is how we would come about with our wind turbine. And an example of our wind farm can be found in southern Manchester, in Rosehill, Manchester to be exact, which is known as Wigton Wind Farm. When you go there, you'll see a number of wind turbines, and they are very tall, and you will also hear them whoosh and making that whoosh sound. All right, you will hear that sound and they will spin. All right, advantages of using the wind turbine. It's like I said, it's an example of a renewable source. Also, it's a low-level technology, and it causes no pollution to the air. However, it has some disadvantages. Here are the disadvantages. Visual and noise pollution. And if we have all had the experience to be in Monroe at the BMR Wind Farm, or we have also been to Wigton Wind Farm, we would have come to realize that these turbines, they do come with sounds. Despite they produce electricity for us, they come with sounds, and that is why you would have also realized that we don't have persons living too very close to these wind farms, because these turbines, they do make noise. Also, only works in windy places, so we can't just get up and just put a wind turbine any random places like that. No, we have to do thorough research, weeks and days of research, and various testing of the wind speed and the wind pattern. We'd have to understand where we have always have consistent amount of wind before we set up a wind farm. Also, when we set up a wind farm, it requires acres and acres of land, so we need a lot of large space. So what you're going to realize is that setting up a wind farm, we can't just go and set it up anywhere, especially where a lot of people living, because we're going to have the issue of relocation, just like for hydroelectric. So like I said, when we're going to set up wind farms, we need a lot of land to set up wind farms. All right, we're going to look at tidal power. Tidal power essentially entails placing a dam across an ocean inlet and harnessing the energy as the water moves in and out with the tides. Some of the advantages of tidal power. It's a renewable source also, doesn't cause any pollution of the air, and it's also useful for isolated islands. All right? Disadvantages: high initial cost and visual pollution. All right? And it's poor energy capture. So to capture energy can be very tedious and difficult. We're going to look into biomass. All right? Biomass. You get biomass energy when the chemical energy in waste becomes chemical energy in biogas. For example, biological materials such as wood, sugarcane, or ethanol is burnt to produce oil. Advantages of biomass. Burning biomass gets rid of solid waste. It creates energy, creates new market for crops as well. Disadvantages though: burning biomass releases CO2 and other gases associated with combustion. It also creates solid waste from the ash. And it may cause more grasslands to be planted for corn. And for areas where we have a high amount of population, we would have to be more concerned about using these lands to plant food in order to protect the food industry and the agriculture industry. So at times, this can be a major challenge in terms of making the decision of whether to use the lands to plant sugarcane to get biogas, or to use these lands to plant to produce food for persons to eat. Geothermal energy. How does it work? It works by us drilling deeper into hot rocks, either wet system where heated water below ground is used, dry system sends above groundwater below ground to get heated, resulting steam can be used for a number of purposes. Advantages. Like I said, it's a type of renewable source. Also, there's no air pollution and there are no environmental problems. So that means this type of energy is very environmentally friendly. Very environmentally, doesn't cause any damage to our environment. All right, disadvantages though is that only available in volcanic regions such as Japan and Indonesia. Japan, where our cars come from, and Indonesia, where majority of our clothes are made. All right, and there's a high cost associated with the drilling into the ground, and there's high cost of setting up pipes and machinery. So that is why geothermal can be major disadvantages, because it will be depending on where you're located in the world. And it's like I said, systems or geothermal power plants are mostly located where you have exposure to volcanoes. For example, in sections of Africa and Japan and Indonesia. All right. Thank you. That's it for now. Next lesson, we'll discuss the forms of energy and current flow. All right. Thank you.